Before you redesign your course evaluations, here's some things that I think you should consider. Again, start with that end in mind. How can you improve your organization? What are the objectives to improve the organization's business? What knowledge, skills, and abilities are necessary to perform in order to achieve those particular objectives? Is there particular new knowledge, skills, or abilities necessary? And if so, what are they? And does the learner need to know this stuff in order to perform their job? If they need to know this stuff, what do they need to know? When do they need to know it? And how are they going to get it? Give them the what's in it for me. It's that with them. They need to know it as much as your organization does. They need to know why they need to take that course. Because that's how, again, you're building that into their performance process. Will the work environment support them when they come back from that training program and allow them to try that new knowledge, skill, and ability? How is their supervisor going to support them? How are you going to keep them motivated? You need to make sure that you are as motivated for them to apply it as they are to apply it when they get back. And the motivation, you have to create the right environment. The motivation is not with them. The motivation is really with you as a supervisor. How are participants going to apply this? What opportunities are you going to give them to show you that they have learned something? How will they know that they're applying it right? And what corrective actions are you going to take to kind of get them right back on the path if they don't quite get it? Not, you did that all wrong. No, I think there might be, is there a refresher that they could take to go, I think you might want to brush up on this particular thing. And what is your feedback mechanism? Truly, are you going to pull them aside? Are you going to just write to them? Are you going to send them an email? What about that face-to-face communication? Develop that relationship with them. What is being changed as a result of them participating in that training? You need to determine what that change looks like and how you will recognize it and how you will document it. I wanted to give you an example of how OPM has restructured their surveys. And this is just an example of one of our courses. But as you can see, it's part of our end of a course survey. We use an even point Likert scale. And I'm not saying this is the greatest, but it's our redesign and it's what we've been using, and we found it to be relatively successful. But as you can see, what we've done is we have actually incorporated the different principles within each of the different learning levels. So again, customer satisfaction, engagement, and so forth, we're part of learning level 1. That's what these questions go to, is engagement. Program relevance. Again, why is this important to them and why is it important for them to attend this training class? Their attitude, their confidence in being able to attend that training class, and how are they being in that training class? Again, you want to make sure that you're capturing that. And then the confidence has to do with, are they able to actually, yeah, I'm confident I can do this. Yeah, I can do this. Yeah, I'm pretty confident I can do this back on the job. Yeah, I'm going to get that kind of support. Yeah, this is going to be great. This is going to work. Yeah. And are they committed to doing this? I am absolutely using this when I get back on the job. And I'm going to tell all my colleagues about it, because this is the greatest, training since sliced bread. Because this really makes a difference. What kind of support tools? Again, it asks them, what do they think? How are they going to be supported when they get back on the job? What's in place now? And what's not in place? And again, the behavior change. I feel that my work behavior will change. Why? How? We give them a chance to explain that. It was a worthwhile investment of their time. Again, it gets to them on a personal level. You want to ask them those types of questions because that's important. How they feel is as much as what they believe. Because most of the time, your change will occur based on their feeling and not what they're thinking. So, why should FDA measure training effectiveness? Well, there's just a couple things. Again, it's the what's in it for me question at the organizational level. It's obvious that you take your training seriously. It's very obvious of that. You've spent a great deal of time in creating the resources and in designing and developing a comprehensive curriculum. There's no doubt about it whatsoever. You spent the time planning and holding this training summit. You know, there is no doubt that you are interested in committing the time to your people, and I applaud you for that. But in order for you to make sure that the training investment has not been done in vain, I think you need to take that next step and invest in the effective evaluation methodology. An effective strategy will help you build a better approach to career development. It truly will. And as part, as you start to collect that data, you will be able to start seeing, oh, we've got a gap here. Oh, we could address that this way. Or you may see things that you didn't even know were a problem. Or things that are really, really going right. I mean, that's incredible. Collecting the right type of data will help you provide the necessary evidence to those people at the top to help create those justifications for additional resources as well, because you've got the data to prove it to them. You also start to create that solid foundation for a new organizational learning vision, which I think is very important to this particular organization. You start to have a real learning culture. If you ask somebody what your contribution has been to the organization, all you have to do is point to your training framework and the results of that training to say, this is what we've contributed. This is the difference I'm making to this organization. And wow, wouldn't that be cool to be able to stand up and go, we did this. This is why. I'd say that that would be a very impressive legacy for any government organization. So quick recap. Again, measuring training is important in order to adhere to regulatory requirements, provides a means of effective decision making. There are multiple ways that you can measure training effectiveness. There's no doubt about it. But you need to choose what's right for your organization and your type of training. And that it is something that will support your organizational goals themselves. And also measuring training effectiveness can change your organizational outlook and create that culture of learning and really demonstrate the level of commitment to your employees and their developmental needs. These are a couple final quotes that I've found that I think are pretty relevant. This first one, Kathy Bradshaw. She is a relationships director at Fairplace Cedar. It's a company of experts in career management and leadership over in the UK. Training evaluation ought to provide input into decision making at the beginning of the training cycle, just as training needs analysis does. So you guys have done a lot of analysis on your training needs, but you have to start to put that effort into your evaluation of it now too. And then the other one from Milton Friedman, who was a great economist. One of the greatest mistakes is to judge policies and programs by their intentions rather than their results. You want to demonstrate results in all of this hard work that you guys are doing. And believe me, as I sat in the back of the classroom here this afternoon and listened to all of your different things, I'm like going, yeah, we do that too. Oh my God, we've had those issues too. So I can feel your pain. I can totally sympathize with you because we have been through this ourselves. And it's just been a pleasure to be able to talk to you a little bit about this. There's some of the references. I believe it's in the presentation slides. But does anybody have any questions?
So we are embarking upon a major training effort because we're rolling out new legislation.
Mm-hmm.
And we are, what we haven't done in the past very well, we our investigators always are the ones that used to get to go to training. But we now are going to make sure that their supervisor and compliance officer, so everyone is hearing the information together. You talked about coming back and trying to demonstrate as to what you learn. You know, now that we are broadening the attendance of the training, does that make a difference? Like, how do you, when you have it now where the supervisor is going to be receiving the training at the same time that the employee is receiving it, how do you then make your adjustments?
Well, I think you have a great opportunity because you're doing training based on legislation. So it's demonstrating we have to do training to help support this legislation. So you have the perfect opportunity to say these are the objectives of this training and this is why it's important that you attend. Having supervisors and their reportees in the same training class is actually a fabulous opportunity. My recommendation is that you make sure they're not on the same teams because you want to make sure that they know that they are clear to talk about issues in those particular work teams depending on what the training is so that they can feel clear. But make sure you set ground rules up front because we've done this before. What happens in the classroom stays in the classroom. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Okay? Set those ground rules up front and early. Because again, you can put it to them and say, hey, you guys, as investigators, you guys have been through a lot of this training, but your supervisors haven't. It's your responsibility to help them understand why this is important and how it impacts you as you're doing your job. Convey to them why it's important as investigators, but supervisors, why it's important, because you have to support these people. If you set up that dialogue early and often, up front, you will have a great reception from everybody that goes and actually participates in that training class. But set it up front before they even go. Because again, as I talked about expectations, why are we sending them? Why are we sending investigators? Why are we sending supervisors? Now, why are we sending them both together? Talk about the expectations.
One of the things that I think we struggle with is that the culture of this organization had historically been, you went to training, now you're good to go. And so the supervisor and the compliance officer and everybody in that management chain didn't understand what you had learned, which is why we're switching the way we're doing it. But we still have to change that culture change. Because this organization is sitting in the classroom for 20 hours, 40 hours, 2 hours on a webinar, isn't going to change that behavior if they're not allowed to use it when they get back into that workforce. And part of what we have to make sure we make the messaging to the supervisors and the whole chain of command is that they've learned something. No more, well, in this X place, in my district, in my region, in my state, I don't know if it's happening in states, but I know when I'm here at FDA, we do it this way. No, this is the way we're now going to do it. And that, I'm assuming, when you talked about kind of that accountability aspect, we're talking performance measures, we're talking SDS plans, we're talking, check-ins and PMAPs and all of that, because what gets measured gets done. And part of the process has always been we track butts and seats, said something else, butts and seats, but we don't necessarily say, so what now?
Yeah, no, believe me, we used to track butts and seats. Woohoo! Yeah, that got us really far. Results not demonstrated. But you're absolutely right. It's the accountability piece. And so as you've gone through your training curriculum now, I think you have the perfect opportunity to take the time and go, okay, let's take a look at our strategic plan and our objectives and our goals. Where do we see in those links to this training curriculum? If you don't see it, guess what? Hard decisions by leadership to get you guys involved to help create those links where they can be mapped from the training programs all the way to the organizational strategic goals and objectives. Because again, you want to keep the end in mind. So how can we demonstrate this? Again, the level 4 is easy enough to do. The hard part is creating it and linking it back to the training piece of it.
And having that evaluation piece so that the supervisor knows the employee is working the way it's
Yes, exactly. And
I think the problem we've had in the past is the employee comes in with new information, but the supervisor's still operating on information from 10 or 15 years ago.
And so that's all the more reason that you create it within their performance, supervisory performance, as well as investigator performance. You have to have those links in there to say. And in their performance is, it could be something as simple as allowing investigators to demonstrate new learning techniques or new investigation techniques based on blah, 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 blah. Something. Find some sort of measurement, some sort of metric that somebody else uses, something similar, and see if you can apply that all the way up. Well, we don't quite do, but we can help as much as we can. Yeah.
One of the challenges that we had in other agencies I've worked for before coming here for 20 years is if you do not use the 5-point scale, you do not capture the people who really do have a neutral response. To accommodate that, what we typically did was to have a script for the instructor handing out the evaluation where we said, we don't want you to put down the medium. I know you want to go home. This is important information for us to collect. We really want you to answer the questions one by one, and this is how it affects the training in the future. And when we do that, then it's very effective to use the 5-point scale.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Because, again, evaluations at the end of the day, yeah, people are just trying to get the heck out of Dodge. But you have to tell them at the beginning of the training class that there's an evaluation and why it's important. And then you have to remind them during the class that, oh, by the way, yeah, you're going to be getting an evaluation at the end of the class. And you may decide that you're able to do evaluations along the way because they're able to capture the data right then and there going, oh, yeah, this is really good. I learned this X, Y, and Z. You may think about doing, little data capture sheets, whatever, along the way, but then remind them at the end. This is important because this is how we create our baseline to be able to justify our resources to support you guys coming to training.
Yeah, that effectiveness of being able to say, we're breaking right now. I want to remind you that I've already handed out this evaluation. It's those section ones that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
That quick jot them down before you forget them because we're going to fill your head again when you come back.
Exactly.
So it's very critical to have that instructor script that goes with the evaluation instrument.
Right. And again, your scale will depend again on your type of training, but I highly recommend that you really take a look at your training evaluation survey and make sure you're using the same thing for all programs.
We have time for one more question.
Yes.
I've got it. But I have a comment and a question, and one of our comments is in the new hire training that we have, in the last week of the 6 weeks, we actually have a teleconference with that includes all the supervisors of all of the people who are at the training. And they go over what is expected of them when they get back, so that was one thought. But my question for you is, how do you collate that data? Like what kind of IMIT system or?
We actually have, our learning management system is Metrics That Matter. And they've been doing a lot of training across government and other types of business arenas. And so we, working with James Kirkpatrick and the Kirkpatrick Partners team, helped to formulate our questions and so forth, but then we built that into our learning management system once we developed what the questions are and the scale and so forth. So then, it spits out an engagement report, it spits out a customer satisfaction report, it spits out all those different areas within the principal areas of learning level 1, 2, 3, and 4. We also send out surveys, 6 months after the class to the participant and their supervisors. It's very important that we collect that data now. But we map our questions to the different Kirkpatrick principles within the 1, 2, 3, and 4. And those questions, and then again, it's loaded into our learning management system so it can crank out the data.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you for